You're an American entrepreneur that specializes in multi-unit, multi-state franchising.
Yep.
You've been a franchise owner for over 20 years, right?
Almost 20, yeah.
And you currently own 50 franchise locations across the Midwest.
We were going to buy a local pizzeria. We were living in a college town. Pizza places do really well. And one of my bosses was like, don't buy that. He's like, you need to do a franchise. I'm like, well, what's a franchise? And he's like, they're going to teach you how to run a business. My experience in life in general is the more successful someone is, the more they're likely and wanting and willing to help other people.
Jesse, thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I appreciate your time today. You're an American entrepreneur that specializes in multi-unit, multi-state franchising.
Yep.
You're chairman or chair of the multi-unit franchise conference in Vegas. And you've been a franchise owner for over 20 years, right?
Almost 20, yeah.
Almost 20.
Yeah, our first location opened up March of 2005.
Okay,
So
got it. And that was Little Caesars,
it
right?
was, yeah.
Okay. And you currently own 50 franchise locations, territories across the Midwest.
Yeah, actually, even over to California and as far south as Louisiana right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Was the California acquisition or...
These are all builds.
Okay.
So that particular brand is Ideal Image. It's a medical spa. And it's not a true franchise in the sense where there's a franchise disclosure document. There's not a franchisor-franchisee relationship. It's a joint venture. So we're both on the hook for some of the money, and it's my lease, my equipment, my employees, but much like how a lot of hotels are set up, I'm paying the corporate entity to manage it.
Got it.
So it's more of an investment than an actual operational thing for me.
Okay. And we'll get into that because I think the Ideal Image came into your sphere after your Little Caesars exit, correct?
Yeah, one fueled the other one. We were very happy with Little Caesars, but it was a situation where the brand was on an uptick. And so when things are on an uptick, they're more valuable. And so we took an opportunity to say, hey, let's exit this and let's get into something else that's, similar or same money or more with less work. It's a no-brainer, right? So for us, it was just time to evolve out of Little Caesars and move into something else.
Got it. So you're a natural-born entrepreneur, my impression at least. And I read in the St. Louis Business Journal, you had an article in there maybe a few years ago where you said you felt like entrepreneurship has kind of always been in your blood.
Oh, yeah.
Can you give us some background on how you grew up and maybe your first shot at entrepreneurship?
Sure. Well, there's two parts of this story. The first part is the foundation of who I am and my work ethic, my ethos. I come from a long line of farmers. I mean, we came over from Germany in the 1800s, and Illinois gave us some land. We started farming. We still have some of that land. So, there's some accountability in farming that's not in anything else, because if you don't go get the crop, you don't eat, right? But it's not the same as a traditional business or a factory or something like that you own and operate, right? It's much different. So I got my work ethic and I got my fundamentals that at the end of the day, if you don't have a good harvest, you don't have a good life. So I got that idea from them. But in my high school years, I fell upon some large entrepreneurs that just liked me for some reason, took me under their wings. So I'm like 16, 17, and they're taking me out ski shooting. No, the reason for this is not some creepy thing. I started dating one of their nieces, right? So
Got it.
But it was like, keep your enemies close and your enemies closer, or your friends close, but your enemies closer. Like, I think they just wanted to make sure I was being good to their niece. But I learned a lot, and honestly, that was the very beginning. And then when I went to college, I ran into more alumni from the fraternity that I joined that were entrepreneurs. And I noticed that they had some freedoms that my parents, I didn't have, none of my friends had, none of my friends' parents had that weren't entrepreneurs. And those freedoms were, they had freedoms for their time, their money. I mean, they could make as much as they wanted when they wanted, purpose, and relationships. So, like, if you work with someone, if you have a job and you have a boss, sometimes you may not like that boss, and that's a relationship you have to manage, right? As an entrepreneur, if you don't like that relationship, you don't have to have that relationship, whether it be with a vendor or an employee or a partner, like you have choices that I don't think a lot of people have. So when I got those exposure to those freedoms, I was like, well, I'm never going back. Yeah.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned the farming background. Farming is similar to entrepreneurship in terms of, and it is entrepreneurship in terms of the onus is on you to make something happen or not happen.
Yeah.
But one thought I had, and I don't know if this tied into your desire to grow beyond a single franchise unit. When you're a farmer, you're almost like the single unit operator in terms of you have to be there. You can't outsource the work, or you can't hire as many folks as you need in order to remove yourself and have that freedom. Did that tie into your desire for growth early on at all?
Well, with the farmer thing, it's a little bit more interesting because it's so much like entrepreneurism in the fact that, you live on the farm. And so you walk outside, you see the weather that's like you're in your business the entire time. You don't get to go home behind a gated community and pretend like what you do for a living isn't around you and interacting with you all the time. And that was something that I enjoyed. I'm never on and I'm never off. I'm like this in-between state where I'm enjoying personal life and business life at the same time. And it's taken a while to manage that. It's been a long time to be able to find people I can have relationships with that could appreciate that. And also for me to have enough restraint that put the phone down. It's time to be focused on, that person next to you, that kind of stuff. Go back to that question about the multiple locations.
Yeah. So did that, not seeing the freedom early in your life, did that really drive you to want to grow? Because you grew relatively rapidly in terms of...
we did. Well, my younger brother is my business partner. And so there was two of us, there was two mouths to feed. So we really realized we needed multiple locations to have a lifestyle that we were wanting to have, right? It was never going to come out of one location of anything. So, from day one, oddly enough, our goal was 50 units. Now, you could say, well, you hit it. I'm like, okay. We're not at 70 units because we just haven't found the right deals yet. We want to keep growing. But when we find the right deals, we're going to be at 70 probably in a snap of a finger.
Got it. Yeah. And that's primarily because you have
acquisitions. So we're just waiting. Franchising is interesting. If you've got a brand that's been around for 20, 25 years or more, you're going to have some franchisees that are at the age where they want to retire. And if they don't have children that they want to run the business, or the business, they don't have children, they're going to have to sell it, right? And so I think with COVID, I think there was a lot of sales that took place the first year of COVID. People were like, I'm out. I'm too close to retirement. I don't want this frustration. But then a lot of businesses never really bounced back 100% from 2019. So their evaluations weren't right. And they were just like, I can't leave on a low, or this is what I think my business is worth because I remember when it was worth that. And now we're rolling into 3-4 years past that. And so it's hard to say that your business is worth XYZ from 2019, but 4 years have gone by and this is actually your revenue or what you're doing now. In some cases, it could be up too. So it's not a gloom story, but I think in 2024 and 2025, I think we're going to see a lot more of the upper 50s and lower 60-year-olds that have been in franchising for 20 plus years. I think they're going to want to start to retire, and they're going to feel like, okay, my business is what it is, and this is what it's worth. I'm going to exit. So I'm excited about the next 2 years, even though I don't know if the economy is going to be great for everybody.
It's interesting you say that, because in our business, or just as far as we're concerned, we're also waiting for acquisition opportunities. And we're also primarily buying from mom and pops. Some of them are retiring. Some of them are just kind of worn out. So do you think in our business, for example, we think interest rates, taxes, insurance, those are all going to impact asset values. When you're looking at an acquisition, or when you will be looking at acquisitions, do you think those three factors will impact the values, or is it something else?
For us, whenever we build brand new, and we're opening new locations, like I've got one Sport Clips where I've got a lease signed. We're just waiting for the developer to build the building for us to move into. And I just got back from a weekend in Michigan looking for another location, and I think I found a couple viable spots. So I've got to start hitting the phones and talking to brokers here when we get off of this interview. I'm still going to grow some, but for me, acquisitions are just a better play for me right now. And the acquisitions could or could not be more expensive than building them, but I can acquire an example. There might be a deal that I have that's 20 units. That would take me 4 years to build those, do it correctly, right? just in site selection, build outs, staffing, training. But I can take over someone's business overnight. So that's probably where the acquisitions will come from.
I'd like to come back to the 20 units just as a hypothetical in a little bit, but your first franchise experience was with Little Caesars. Can you kind of briefly touch on how that opportunity came about and how you got involved?
Yeah. So when I was in college, I started working for a technology startup company. And I did well enough that I stayed from my junior year of college to the age of 27, 26, and made great money with them. And my brother was graduating college, and we were going to buy a local pizzeria. We were living in a college town. Pizza places do really well. And one of my bosses was like, don't buy that, And he liked the pizza too. It wasn't like that. But he's just like, you've got a lot of great skills, but you don't know how to run a business. And I'm like, he's like, you need to do a franchise. I'm like, well, what's a franchise? And he's like, they're going to teach you how to run a business. So got on the internet, started looking up pizza franchises. Eventually, we stumbled across Little Caesars, and it was just a perfect timing, perfect place.
So with the Little Caesars, you and your brother acquire that franchise, and you are working in it 7 days a week.
Oh, yeah.
How did you go from working in that Little Caesars to on the Little Caesars and expanding, acquiring new franchises or building?
Yeah. So when I worked for the technology startup company, I worked 7 days a week. There was things I could be doing on the back end. I did sales, but there was things I could do prospecting wise on the weekends that I did when I had downtime. I didn't have children, and I wanted to keep making more money so I could start my own business. And I will say this, I get this question asked all the time. My son wants to start out, or my daughter wants to start out and be an entrepreneur. What advice do you have? Number one, go get a sales job. Do that with someone else, right? So I don't come from like generational money. Like everything to start my business was money I saved up. And the sad truth is sales jobs are the only jobs where you get to determine how much you make, not your boss. And so if you're more productive, you're more efficient, you can make more money. And that's what I was doing. I was making a lot of money. This is like 2003 numbers, but I was making $180,000 a year at the age of 23, 24, 25. And somehow, by the grace of God, I was smart enough to save it and not go buy nice big things like most people do. But that's where we got the money. Now, the reason we were both working in the business is because I blew my nut on that first location. There was no more cash, right? I had enough to live on for a little bit, but we really needed to master and get our genius level 10,000 hours in. And, both he and I working in it at basically free labor, we were able to make a lot of money. So 16 months later, we opened up our second Little Caesars, and then we started paying ourselves a little bit. And then 16 months later, we opened up two more. And it just became an exponential thing. But there was the momentum takes a while to build up, the inertia. So that's why we were both working in the business, because we needed to make as much money drastically as fast as we could. And that was the only way to do it, is get in there with the sweat equity.
And while you were growing that Little Caesars business into multiple locations, you were also looking at potential other opportunities, correct? And other franchises you could be involved in?
So we were in rural markets where any kind of real marketing other than like radio or TV was once a month. Okay, so 1 out of 4 weeks I could have a really good, strong week because of marketing. The other 3 was just based on location. I didn't like that. So I started looking around what were some other options, and I discovered there was a brand called Valpak. It's a blue envelope. Most suburban cities, the wives for sure know about it because it's marketed towards the women because they make most of the consumer spending decisions. But we opened up a Valpak territory, it's 5 territories in Southern Illinois, just as another vehicle outlet for our Little Caesars. And of course, you're going to lose money if you're the only thing in it, and people aren't going to open it if you're the only thing in it. So I had to go out and hire salespeople, and we went out and met with business owners and tried to get them to advertise in the envelope. And during that process, I got to sit down and interview a lot of business owners and find out, how much money were they really making? Because if you ask certain questions, you can deduce what they're making, right? They're not going to come out and tell you X, Y, Z. I mean, that's kind of a personal question to most people. But, you ask what the margins are, what's your sales, what does it cost to get you a client? The funny thing is most of these business owners had no idea what it cost to get them a new client, right? They never tracked their marketing that way. So I realized that both in the carpet cleaning business and in the salon business, there were no salon owners that were savvy enough about marketing And, not all business owners are created equal anyway. So I just figured if I could do just as good of a job in those two categories and do marketing well, I'll win every time. So I got into the next two brands because of my experience with Valpak and just interviewing other business owners.
So correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like when you're deciding on which industry to explore in terms of franchises, you're looking for an industry that's fragmented and unsophisticated. Is that correct?
I'm in medical spas now, right? That's probably the antithesis of what you just described. A lot of regulation, a lot of highly developed and trained medical professionals. I'm really looking at two things, and I kind of put them in two different categories. I need to understand who the ideal customer and who the ideal employee is, and then it's about a return on my investment, the time. It's not the dollar amount, whether it costs $250,000 or $1 million per location open. I want to know how quick can I make that money back, because the truth is wealth is a measurement of time. It's not a measurement of money. So what I try to do is look for investments that I'll make my entire money back in 36 months or less, entire investment. And that's talking about cash on hand and my debt service. So if something costs $500,000 open, I want to be able to make that back in 3 years or less.
Got it. So just to go back to what I was saying, and it sounds like it's not relevant. What I thought was you're looking for fragmented ownership in terms of like not one large player owning that space, and then unsophisticated competition in terms of not having the operations in place that a franchise might bring. But it sounds like you're more so concerned with that payback period and determining whether or not you'll get that return on your investment that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the truth be told, if I'm looking at a new brand, if I don't find anyone in that brand that's a franchisee that I'm like, wow, that person's pretty smart, I don't know if I want to be in that, because I want someone else that's already smart, already figured it out, to be there as proof that, hey, someone else that's really smart believed in this too, and two, will they mentor me? Can I learn from you? So my learning curve is much shorter than yours was.
Do you find that with a lot of brands, the more successful operators are really willing and able to help others?
My experience in life in general is the more successful someone is, the more they're likely and wanting and willing to help other people. And I'm at that way now. If someone really wanted some advice, the biggest thing that would turn me off would be take my time, take my advice, and don't do anything with it. Right? That would be the only way that would stop me from having a relationship with someone moving forward that was interested in learning from me. So, I still have people I reach out to on a regular basis and ask what they think.
Got it.
All the time. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So if we were to go back to the great clips, for example, or sports clips,
Yeah.
not great clips. I need to clarify that. Or the Oxi Fresh Carpet Cleaning.
Uh-huh.
How were you able to grow those? Did you acquire a certain number of territories when you first contacted the brand?
So the first, I've been in sport clips for 12 years, and I would say the first 6 years or so was almost 100% self-growth. Like we find a location, build it, open it, staff it. The second half of my life with sport clips so far has been more acquisitions. Not that I haven't opened more, but it's just been more acquisitions. And it partly is because the brand's been around long enough that there's people wanting to retire, not because they weren't doing well in it. They were just ready to retire. Now with Oxi Fresh, we actually purchased a existing area here in town. And they only had like one of the 6 territories or 2 of the 6 territories. And we purchased that and then purchased the rest around it. And that was a situation where they weren't fully committed to the business. They were. I think they were like a nurse or something else. They did something else full time, and so it's a hobby. If A, you're not making money at it, and B, if you're not focused on it, right? So I think it was more of a hobby for that person. They were ready to get out, and so we came in. We got that deal done cheaper than if we were just to buy it brand new and open it up. So there's always good deals out there if you're looking in the right places.
That makes sense. Where would you say folks should look if they're looking for a franchise opportunity? Should they make connections with brokers? Like in our world, for example, almost everything runs through brokers. So broker relationships are the most important if you're looking at acquisition.
I definitely think brokers are good handholders to someone that's never been in franchising. The chair of the Franchise Updates Multi-Unit Franchise Conference that's in March, of 2024. That is a conference. That is the franchisee conference. Okay, that is the conference where you're going to get the largest number of diverse franchisees from all over, in fact, worldwide actually, but mostly U.S. And everyone hears multi-unit. It's everyone that's interested in multi-unit growth. Okay, so if you've got one location or you're thinking about getting into your first location, and you have a vision of having 5, 6, 7, there's people there that have 500, 600 locations. They're going to tell you how they got there because they all started with one location. They all did.
I can't think of any other country in the world where someone can own 500, 600 locations of a particular brand. I think that really speaks to the opportunity in this country, like we were briefly speaking about before we started here. Just going back to what you mentioned regarding Oxi Fresh, you mentioned that one of the sellers or the seller of some of the territories was not focused on the business. So you're involved in multiple brands, multiple industries, very different clientele, very different needs from consumers, customers. How are you able to operate all these different brands? Do you just focus on the business basics and maybe let your team members that are focused on individual brands really have autonomy, or how would you say you're able to do that?
Development and delegation. Yeah. So I've got great managers. I've got great area managers that handle the day-to-day to everything. And then I'm in contact with them via the phone or email or Zoom. And it's all coaching. It's all about having the right culture and having everyone clearly understand what the actual goal is. Like, why are we coming to work every day? And, for my area managers, like at Sport Clips as an example, they have one job, is to make sure that everyone that works underneath them is making more than they were last year, because we're all productivity based and commission based. So, their goal is drive in more clients, get the stylist to be more efficient, get the clients to upsell, or the stylist to upsell more. And that's how you grow the business. So they can peel that onion much different ways based on their skill set or what their energy level is. Sometimes you do something for a while and you need to take a break from that and do something else. So as an example, an area manager may focus on getting our retail sales up. That's going to make sales go up. That's going to make commissions go up. That's one win. Driving in new clients through local store marketing. That's going to bring in more sales because you just simply have more clients. So they can attack this different ways based on how they're feeling, where their strengths are, and where can you go now? Because at some point you get some diminishing returns on your time and investment, right? So you can only get your staff to sell so much retail per client. So once you've done really well at that, go move on to the next challenge. Bring in more clients or get the paid back bar up. That's our upgrades and our haircuts.
That makes a lot of sense. So if you work with your team to set one of those goals, or your team works, your area managers work, or regional managers work with your store managers to set some of these goals, how often would you say they're measuring, one, and two, holding other team members accountable? Is it quarterly? Is it monthly? Do you have a cadence?
Yeah. So oddly enough, while we're doing this interview, my area managers and managers are on a Zoom meeting. They have a weekly meeting on Mondays, and they go over last week's numbers. So it's very much iron sharpens iron. We go over everyone's numbers. There's friendly competition in our organization, right? Everyone's wanting to do better, which is great. I mean, our mission statement has no numbers, no quantitative things. It's about moving up, being excellent, things like that. So once you hit a certain level, it's expected that you need to go to the next level because there's something else out there, because there's someone else who goes, they're on top. I don't want them to be on top. I want to be on top, right? And it's not like a situation like you got crabs in a bucket where they're trying to pull people down. They're just wanting to do better. And so there's like this cross-pollination of inspiration going on in our organization. So I have not been on that meeting for at least 3 years. And the last time I was on it, it was just a special announcement. Self-regulated. They understand. Everyone understands that if the salon performs better, everyone makes more money. So they're just already interested in that. And then I have a weekly Zoom meeting with all my area managers, and we go over what we expect off them. And the number one thing that they have to do, and it takes up about 3/4 of the meeting, is they have to share with the other area managers what their wins for the week was. And I can tell you, they don't like it when they don't have a lot of wins. And I don't have to chastise them. I don't have to tell them anything. They beat themselves up when they don't have a lot of wins. And boy, when they do have a lot of wins, they're super excited about it. So the meetings are always fun because there's always 2 or 3 that have amazing wins every week. But for the most part, everyone's got wins. That's a part too, is a function of gratitude, right? If you know you're going to have to get in front of everyone and talk about what went well this week, you're going to start looking for the things that went well. And when you do that, your mindset's completely different. You start seeing all these things, and you're like, this is a great company to work with because this happened. These were great things. I didn't think about it because they happen often, but they're still a win.
That's such a great point. We recently started doing a personal win and business win every Monday in our leadership meeting. And I kind of knew that it incentivizes someone to think a little more positively, but I never quite heard someone put it the way you just did. And it's such a great point to make because I think as humans, we're kind of wired to look at the negative sometimes. So to reset that and have people focus on the positive, I'm sure has been huge for your culture. Do you also have other things you do with your companies or team members to incentivize the type of culture you want to build? You want to build a positive culture, a culture that's about winning or getting better, constant self-improvement. What else are you really trying to focus on?
Well, all the leaders in our company, there are 4 responsibilities of a leader at my company. And the first one is to protect the gratitude. Okay. And what that translates to is the culture. Okay. Culture's king. Culture trumps strategy every day. The second one is protect the vision. So for us, that's the mission statement. Most companies have a mission statement. So the leader must protect that. And where I'm going with that is just making sure all the oars are pulling in the right direction in the water, that you don't have mission creep, right? Because someone's passionate about something and it doesn't get you back to where your core values and what your mission is. And then number 3 is constantly challenging the status quo. So you put some great numbers up on the board, celebrate it, but don't rest on your laurels. And then the 4th thing is constantly develop leaders around you. So the number 1 thing that my team knows, that you can't get promoted unless there's 2 or 3 people that could already do your job better than you that work with you already. And if you've created a vacuum where you don't have anyone that could replace you for a promotion, you don't get considered for the promotion.
Wow, I like that a lot. So that also, I would imagine, prevents micromanaging because you're building up team members versus being a taskmaster, if you will. So do you see a lot of folks in your organization stick around longer than industry norms? In some franchises, I think particularly in food, there's a lot of employee turnover.
Yeah.
Do you see less of that?
I see less turnover in my leadership team than I ever have before. We're looking at and identifying, we've got average turnover for our brand. And to be honest with you, that doesn't set well with anyone in my organization. So we are going back right now and re-looking at what can we do the first 90 days of someone's experience with us as a team member, and how can we make that better? Because all the data shows that if you can get someone to stay 90 days with you, they're going to stay a year with you. And if they stay a year with you, they might just stay 7, 10, 9 years. That's work in progress for us. That's actually something that they're discussing right now in the meeting. And the number 1 thing is that more training sooner. So, I mean, we've always been pretty strong advocates of development, but now we're going to be very regimented about the actual, like, by this day of their age of employment, they have to have completed these things. And that's just, I think people want to do well. And when they feel like they're not, that's when they quit.
Yeah, I agree. Owning multiple brands, do you have team members that are working on multiple brands, or are they all siloed?
They're all siloed. So the only thing that's not siloed is our back office, right? So and that's because money is universal, right? So dealing with vendors, that can come from one person that handles all the different vendors for all the brands. Bookkeeping, I mean, we're doing accrued counting. It's going to be the same for everything. So we only need one controller or bookkeeper for that. But part of my success is I've identified that for any particular business, you need to have a strong understanding who the ideal customer is, and then who is the ideal employee for that customer. And so what is an ideal employee for one brand probably is not the ideal employee for another brand. So we silo those off. And I think anyone that does it the other way, and I've seen people do it, I don't think they're as productive. I think they have a little bit higher turnover. They have, I think, less scales of efficiency too, to be honest with you. Even though they think they do, their performance doesn't show otherwise. And so when I see someone that's in charge of restaurants and a video store, both of them suck, right? But when they were in charge of just the video store was doing great. And it's partly because you hired that person because they were the right fit for the video store. They're not the right fit for the pizza place.
Do you think on a high level you can speak to like what the ideal person is for one of your brands versus the other, just to illustrate that?
Yeah,
point?
absolutely. So Little Caesars, we really liked high school and junior college. It's a taxing job. It's hot. You're moving around a lot. And we just preferred people that were wanting to work that hard, right? So younger, that doesn't mean we didn't have more seasoned employees, but our wheelhouse was the referral at junior college and high school. So we didn't have to actually recruit a whole lot because everyone wanted their friends to work with them. So that was ideal for that one, right? Well, with Sport Clips, I've got to have a licensed cosmetologist, and they've got to enjoy cutting men's hair and not women's hair because 99% of our clients are men. So that's another example where it's like a segment of the entire population of cosmetologists. With our Oxi Fresh, it's general labor, but they're based on commission. So they also have to provide upsells and good service. So it's a different thing than the fast food worker. And then the med pros, clearly they've got to have a nurse practitioner or a doctor. And here's the other thing too. Not all nurse practitioners are created the same. Some enjoy doing Botox and laser hair removal and fillers. Others like working in triage and emergency rooms. Well, someone that really enjoys the adrenaline of working in an emergency room would not like working in one of my medical spas. It's calm. Everyone's happy. No one's sick. So that's where I'm getting at. It's like, well, everyone's like, well, you got to have nurse practitioners. Yeah, but there's a certain type of nurse practitioner that will excel here. And I give Chick-fil-A as a great example. The chicken sandwich is good. Probably not the best chicken sandwich anyone's ever had, right? But what they've done is they figured out what type of employee interaction do the non-fast food eaters want to have? And is that really why they're not having fast food? So it's really, it's very clear. Most of the time, the cars you see in Chick-fil-A drive-thrus, you never see them in Taco Bell or McDonald's drive-thrus.
That's a good point.
They don't. So they're like, oh, I don't eat fast food except for Chick-fil-A. Well, it's still fried chicken. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the exact same product. So it was the experience, and the experience is based on the employee.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing. So one thing that I kind of saw there was as you progressed with different brands and grew your organization, it sounds like, this may not be the right word, but it sounds like your workforce became more sophisticated, more licenses, more certifications. Was that a conscious decision? Like, did you have any issues with...
What wasn't a conscious decision? I think it's just an evolution of, I talk about leadership communication as like a color wheel because I teach this to cosmetologists. So if you're looking at the color wheel, red and orange are right next to each other, but blue is on the opposite side of the wheel. So everyone has a predetermined color that they communicate in. Or their leadership style even. So, if you're a red color, oranges and yellows really get you pretty well. Reds really get you. But blues are like, what are you talking about? Right? So what you need to do is you need to figure out how do you grow your colors. And if you start out as a red, how do you get to green? Because green's closer to blue than any of the other colors. And then they can start to relate with you. You're probably never going to be a blue. It's maybe the polar opposite style. But if you can get another style that's close enough, you have that bridge where you can get that. And I think my ability to lead, attract, I just added more colors to my plume, right? But it wasn't intentional. It's just an evolution. But I will tell you that that's not necessarily a evolution of like, oh, these are better employees. I'm looking at getting right back into the restaurant business. I miss working with fast food workers. I think there's some benefits, some joys that I get working with that demographic than like the meds or the cosmetologist. And I see that with the cosmetologist too. It's like many times you're the first, second, or third positive male role model in their life, right? And you could teach them things and actually help them understand that they are valuable as an individual. Because I definitely look at as team members as an investment and an asset, not a liability or a cost. So I think my ability to communicate to different types of employees is just part of my personal journey, but I don't have a preference on which one I prefer to.
I'm sure that's contributed greatly to your success, especially when you say they're an investment, not an expense. So if we were to look at a hypothetical situation, let's say an opportunity came across your desk to buy territories for a new brand that's getting started or expanding. How would you first evaluate that, and how would your process look in order to decide whether or not it's a good fit for you?
So we'll go back to the first thing. I'm not excited about it unless I can visualize the ideal customer and the ideal employee. Okay, so now I understand what I need to do to be successful. Okay, so let's define what successful is. So I'm looking for two things. I'm looking for the ROI on my initial investment. For me, sweet spot's 36 months. I'm not going to turn away a deal if it's 40 months, but I'm going to get more excited about 24 months, right? Okay, so once I figure that one out, and I've always had that one, always, but over the last couple of years, I've evolved and I've looked at, I don't care about the top performers or the bottom performers. I just want to know average, right? The average sales and the average multiples. When I want to get out of the business, will I make more money selling it than what it costs to open it? And I can tell you, I've gotten into businesses where I spent more money building it than what I was able to sell it for, or other people have. But you made so much money over the 10 years of owning it, it was a good investment, right? But now that I have opportunities to pick and choose what investments, I want to know that the exit strategy is making me money as well as just the holding on to the asset does.
So if you were to find those numbers, first of all, how are you finding them? But then second of all, how are you verifying that they're accurate? Like, for example, and I'm not in your world, but if a franchisor were to provide you with numbers on, hey, these are the average sales per store, do you take that for what it is, or do you do your own due diligence?
You got to do both. So what's great about franchising is, and not all franchisors do it, but the ones that you want to take serious do. It's called an Item 19. There's lots of items in the franchise disclosure document. But the Item 19 is a third-party verified, certified financial statement. Okay. And they're not all created equal. And I'll give you an example. Okay. So many years ago, we were looking at the Jimmy John's brand, and their Item 19 is very strong. And we were really excited about it. But at that time, it was about $100 more or $100,000 more to open up a Jimmy John's and a Little Caesars. And we were still at the point where we were growing Little Caesars. When you started looking, and it was very clear, it said, these are our corporate locations, okay? So when you started talking to the franchisees, I said, hey, does your numbers look like the Item 19? They're like, not for most of my stores. And it wasn't because the brand was being dishonest. It was that the corporate stores were all in markets that had a third meal, which was late night. So they had their lunch, they had their dinner, which is what you're going to have in suburbia. But on college campuses, where they were all, you get the bar rush and the late night, right? So they just had more revenue per square foot, as an example, than the chain did as a whole. Now, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't have exactly the same type of numbers if I only opened up in those same type of spots, right? But we weren't going to do that. We were going to open up in suburbia where we could open a lot of them and manage them. So we skipped on that one. Not because I thought it was a terrible investment. It's just it cost $100,000 more. At the end of the day, it was making about the same money as a Little Caesars. So why not just open another Little Caesars? So we didn't have to learn a new brand. So we did. We opened another Little Caesars just because of that. But so the Item 19 is something that you can really look at and determine that. Now, the other side is that trust but verify, right? So that's what we did. So I got on LinkedIn, started looking up people that were franchisees of whatever brand. We start calling. It's like, hey, what's your experience been? Most people will respond, and they're going to be very honest with you. And you have to take the good with the bad. Like, there's always something not perfect in any relationship. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your interviews and your due diligence, that there's going to be rough patches where, the franchisor was learning how to handle something and it just didn't get done, or it affected that particular franchisee more negatively than it did the brand or the system. So just always kind of take everything in a grain of salt. But when you're dealing with these franchisees, they're going to have different perspectives. So just ask them, what would you do it again? Is the number one question. Would you do this again? And if they say no, and you hear it overwhelmingly, maybe a brand you want to stay away from. If you're like, heck yeah, double down, I'm opening more locations, then it's probably a brand you want to look at a little bit deeper.
That makes a lot of sense. So what about if you were looking at a brand like, I'm sure you've heard of Crumble Cookies.
Yeah.
A year or two ago, I would imagine if you called folks and looked at the numbers, they looked great. But I've heard or read that they're not doing so well now, or the trajectory doesn't look the same.
Yeah.
Is that just a matter of luck, or is that just your gut instinct because you've been in the business for so long? Or is that something that someone can foresee one way or another?
Well, I actually have close friends that are Crumble cookie franchisees, and they seem to be doing very well with it. So I think it's a case-by-case situation. But I will tell you that, and I kind of follow everything in franchising, and from what I can see from a third-party perspective is, and I just know this, if you keep opening locations that are too close to another existing Crumble, like my biggest competitor in Sport Clips is another Sport Clips, not a Supercuts, not a Great Clips. Yes, they're competitors, but our customers don't look identical to each other, but they look identical for the same brand, right? So, as an example with Crumble, if there was only one Crumble in St. Louis, people would drive a little further just to get the Crumble experience, not as frequent. So that's where the trade-off is. You open more locations because you want the frequency to go up. So I think in certain markets, that's been around a little bit longer. They've built out more. They've had franchisees get more aggressive and build out more. And that's going to just dilute the market share. So I think that might be a part of it. I mean, at some point, you have a break even in a business, and then you make way more money as a percentage the higher your sales go, right? You don't, like if you double your sales, you don't just double the profit, you actually probably triple it, because you have things like your overhead, like your manager's salary, you have your rent and your insurance that are the same, whether you're doing $1 million a year or $3 million a year in cookies, as an example. So I think that that might have been it. I think maybe the newness of the brand in some markets. So like my friends, they're opening at new locations, right? So it's still hot. And I can tell you from my Little Caesars, our first year open was always our biggest sales year open. It could take decades before you got back to those sales, because for whatever reason, someone wants to eat your pizza 3 times a week for the first month, and then they get maybe once a month after that, right? It has nothing to do with the quality of the product or the brand or the operations. It's just the flavor comes in and goes. So yeah, talk to your franchisees. In that particular case, I would talk to people that have been in the business for 4 years, because I think Crumble's been around 5-6 years. Talk to the franchisees who've been around 4 years. Are they still really happy with it? And talk to the people that just opened up a year ago. Say, are you happy a year later? Would you do this? And I think if the answer is yes to both, you should do the brand.
It sounds like when one is reviewing the franchise disclosure agreement, is that what it is?
Franchise disclosure document. FDD.
Okay, got it. So when you're reviewing the FDD, it sounds like the territory is very important, because I think I read a while back that Subway had a similar issue where they were just allowing too many stores to open up too close to each other. So that would be outlined in the FDD, correct, in terms of how large your territory is and if competitors can enter?
Yeah, it should be, but keep in mind that those things are the bare minimum, right? So you got to put yourself in the perspective of the franchisor too, right? You want to right size it, and you don't know how to right size it all the time until you get more data, more locations. So the area of protection isn't the same everywhere. It's kind of like when you watch real estate commercials, it says markets vary, So markets do vary. So I can tell you, I've got markets that if I put a second Sport Clips in that market, my sales would probably half, because I just take what I've got. I've got a majority of the market. So just owning another location isn't going to really get me a lot more in the market. But I've got other markets where if I open another location, the first one's probably going to do better just because of the brand recognition, not because lack of capacity. So I think it's a case-by-case situation where you open them and how close they are. I can tell you that in Michigan, I opened some locations too close to each other. When I closed one of them down and moved all the employees over to the other location, like 90% of the clients moved over. It was a win. I had half the overhead and almost doubled the sales. But that was my fault. That wasn't the franchisor's fault. I was the one that said, I think this is far enough. And the reason is, in my other markets, those stores were further away from each other than I have other stores that are doing just great. So every market's a little different.
So it sounds like it's a true balancing act and a partnership between the franchisor and the franchisee in terms of making that determination. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, and I think as we get more data and we know what zip codes our customers live in and where they are traveling with cell phone data, not that you can actually see that Harriet is driving around on I-80. You can see that one of your customers is driving around on I-80. That's it, for those that are worried about that. It's double blinded, but that's where the new level of real estate intelligence is coming in. Is just knowing, okay, you got this customer here. They're either going to shop when they're at home working from home, or the 3 days of the week when they're working in the office that's 30 miles away, they're going to be here. So where are they? And having both locations, is that beneficial or not? Because of their going back and forth. It's part science, it's part art, real estate location.
It's interesting you mentioned the cell phones, because I had a discussion with a friend on the show a few weeks ago now, actually. And what they do is they buy retail centers that are shadow anchored, so next to Walmarts. And regarding the cell phones, what they track is when they're looking at a retail center, they want to make sure someone's going to that Walmart and then going to the retail center after, or vice versa, something along those lines. So I didn't know that level of sophistication was, it sounds like, in most industries. Do you think every franchisee is looking at stuff like that? Or is that one of your competitive edges, that you're tracking and really staying on top of a lot of the data points?
I'll be honest with you. I'm looking at that data just to verify my gut. Okay. I'm not looking at that data and then going out and trying to find a location. I had to go out and find my first Little Caesars location. What I'm so grateful for is they sent someone down to teach me what I should be looking for. And we just drove the market and we're like, what do you think of that location? It's hard to see, isn't it? Yeah, probably not a good location. Okay. So I learned, and it's my gut. So, I'm envisioning what that ideal customer looks like. Like, would they turn left on this road coming home from work? If that road looks like a pain in the butt to cross, probably not, right? Now, I'll give you an example. Someone who is affluent and they're probably not going to cross over a bad traffic place for a $5 pizza. They'll just drive down and pay $10 for the pizza because it's a pain in the ass and it might take more time. But if you've got a value-conscious customer in that neighborhood, if it's a different neighborhood, they'll cut across for that $5 savings, right? So again, it's totally understanding who your ideal customer is to help play into where that real estate play is.
That makes a lot of sense. I would imagine to have that level of understanding of a market, it takes more than just a 20-minute drive around. So do a lot of your future locations or potential locations get run past your existing managers if they have a better understanding of the markets they're operating in?
No, it all falls on my shoulder. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And what I'll do is I'll drive it a few times, different day parts. Like basically, when we're opening, mid whatever time we're open, and when we're closing, what does it look like? Because what you don't want is you don't want everything to be busy on one particular day part. It's hard to staff for that. Like in the salon business, I'm only going to have so many stylists able to work because I only have so many chairs. So I'd like it to be busy in the morning. I'd like to be busy at night. And I'd like to be busy in the middle of the day. That's optimum, right? So I'm looking and seeing that. The only way you're going to really know that is if you just go to that particular location, sit in your car, listen to music, and just watch traffic. See who's in the parking lot. See what type of people are in the parking lot. Are they your customers? As an example, we mostly do men's haircuts. So if it's all women in there and no kids in that parking lot, it's probably not a good location for a Sport Clips. Probably a great location for a nail place, right? But and if I see all guys, because I see a Home Depot in the background and I see a sports bar next to it, it's probably going to be a home run.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure a lot of that comes down to the fact that you and your brother, I think, retain full ownership of the company. So you don't really have investors or a board that you need to report to, and you can use your gut to make decisions, which I think is very important.
Yeah, I'm very thankful that my brother and I see eye to eye on like 99% of everything. We have the same moral compass. We have the same opinions of money and investments, and we just don't have any arguments like that. So, yeah, it's very nice to have that freedom that I talked about earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great point. And I'm sure that was a conscious decision to maintain that freedom as you built the company, maybe not accept investors or
everything that we've done through our own growth, right? So we've done debt financing, and the reason we do debt financing is because the way our company is set up, it's a tax benefit. It helps not pay as much in taxes through deductions. But other than that, we've not brought any equity in, no outside investors or partners. Now, we did form a partnership with a good friend of mine for our medical spas, and we all went in a third on that. But that was just, we didn't need him, and he didn't need us. We just really liked the guy, and we wanted to do business with him. So it was more about the relationship that I talked about, the freedom of the relationships, more than the freedom of the money in that particular case.
When I talk to a lot of folks that have partners or multiple partners, partnership issues seem to be one of the biggest challenges or roadblocks that they run into. It sounds like you don't have anything of that sort. What are some of the roadblocks or challenges that you run into in your operations? Is there any recurring theme among different brands or anything that may come to mind there?
You could always be a better employer of choice, and that's such a broad term, but it's, I really would like more of my team members to feel more supported. Okay. And I want them to have autonomy. I want to develop them where they're self-sufficient, but I also want them to know that there's a backstop. So I always feel like I could constantly be improving on that. I feel like I do a good job. I'm told by others that I do a good job at that, but I always think there's that one opportunity where I could do something different. And every once in a while, I'll get an employee that did not survive with us, we'll say, and I'll get a lengthy Facebook message or whatever, and I read it and I take it very serious, and I pass it on. I said, okay, what could we've learned from this? And normally the message is very telling that they were not a good fit. So my question is, okay, her message to me or his message to me tells me she was not a good fit for our culture. How did this person get through our sniff test? So we're constantly refining who is the best people to work with, because if you don't have great people, you can't attract great people.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that really ties into the overall theme of our conversation. I think a lot of it has come down to people. You have great people, a great culture that allows you to have freedom, that allows you to grow your company, that allows your customers to have a great experience.
My personal belief is if you want to do something fast, you got to do it by yourself. Okay, committees will just kill everything. But if you want to go far, you can't do it by yourself. You're going to have to bring someone with you. So that's always been our philosophy, is we want to go far. And we're going to have to bring as many people and develop as many people with us to make that happen. Because as we add locations, I can't visit them, right? Too many locations too far away. I've got to have people that are invested, that care, that are committed to helping other people. And so it's got to be a group effort for this to work the way it does.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think perfectly ties into the last part of our show, which we call a hole-in-one. It's just your greatest piece of advice that you can give to someone that they can implement today, either in their business or personal life. It can be either.
Yeah.
Do you have something that comes to mind?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about your meetings with your staff. So when I have meetings, especially when I do like leadership development with my team, we use the word goal, but I'm not a fan of goals. I like milestones a little bit better, right? But let's just, for the sake of purpose, say goals. A lot of times we set these big, hairy, audacious goals, BHAGs, right? None of it happens without the first step. If you're going to run a marathon, it starts with the first step, right? So, the chips, Pringles, once you pop, you can't stop. So we always end our meetings with, what is your Pringle? What is the one thing you're going to start today that's going to get you to your goal? And it's fun because people in the very beginning, they'll say, well, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And the whole team will go, smaller. It's got to be smaller. Like, it's got to be such a small thing that you're going to do that to not do it would be like, what? People will be like, why didn't you do it? It was so easy, but it's a step. And so I always say this for fitness, right? I want to be physically fit. So every day I am committed to one push-up. Now, when I get on the floor, I never do just one push-up. But if I were to say I want to do 50 or 100 push-ups, which normally 100 is my goal, if I'm not feeling great or I had a big night of drinking or just up all night for whatever reason, I could excuse that and say, well, I'm not going to do it. Then I didn't do any. It didn't move me towards my goal at all. Or I start feeling like I'll do them tomorrow. I'll do 200 tomorrow. 200 is pretty daunting. And I start doing it. I can't get to 200. I didn't do it. I'll just start over next week. At the end of the day, I didn't move my health forward. So the Pringle is what forces you to get down on the ground, do that one push-up. And after you do one, maybe you're not going to do 100, but you're doing 60, 70. And you feel a lot better and you're a lot healthier than if you just excused and said, I'll do it tomorrow or whatever. So we always talk about the Pringle. What is that? So I could give you another Pringle that I had a cosmetologist tell me. The goal was I'm going to create a better customer experience. Okay? That's big picture stuff. So what are you going to do? Well, my Pringle is I'm going to say their first name 3 times during their haircut. I'm going to say it this time, and this time at different stages of the haircut. And that'll be my Pringle. So it's really small. But just saying their name and addressing them by their first name, that elevates the customer experience. Is that the only thing that they needed to do to elevate their customer experience? Absolutely not. But it got them moving in the right direction. So that would be my advice is come up with a Pringle for every goal and start doing it right away.
I love that. I personally am going to start using that. And I think the great thing about the Pringle is it can apply to anyone, regardless of position, and also for any goal.
Yeah.
It can be absolutely anything. It can be, I want to take over the world, right? What's your Pringle? Maybe you take over your neighbor's house, for example.
Yeah. I've got a good friend and he tells me, he's like, I'll share all my secrets with anyone that asks, even my competitors, because it doesn't matter. It's the execution. And if they were going to execute, they're going to figure it out anyway. So I might as well just be a friend. So it's about the execution, and that Pringle starts the execution process.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing for me is when it comes to big picture within the organization, moving from a solo entrepreneur to an entrepreneur that has a team and people that don't directly report to me, it's hard for me to see the execution or how the execution can take shape. So the Pringle is going to help a lot there. Yep. And I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
Before we end the show, I want to mention again that you're the chair of the Multi-Unit Franchising Conference.
Yep.
It's going to be taking place March 19th to 22nd in Las Vegas. Can you share some information on that? You said that a lot of the largest or ambitious franchisees across the country will be there. Anything else folks need to know?
No, it's a great show. So Jim Collins is the keynote speaker, and he's doing a workshop. So he's the author of Good to Great and some other great books too. So you're going to get some great keynote speakers. The panel sessions are going to be franchisees that are like me, sharing their wares of how they've done X, Y, Z and advice. So you're going to get that, and then I call it the best happy hour in Vegas. It's 2 days from 3 to 6. It's open bar and hors d'oeuvres in a huge vendor area where all the franchisors that are out there come to display and try to get you to become aware of their brand. So I go there every year and I learn about new industries I didn't even think were in franchising because they're there because they're ready to take on franchisees. So whether you've got one location or you're thinking about one location or you got 10 locations and you want to get to 20, this is a great conference to go meet other people that are entrepreneurs and in franchising.
Thank you for sharing that as well. If anyone attends the conference and you see Jesse there, make sure to stop and say hi. Jesse, thanks for your time today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Appreciate it.
I really appreciate it.